Hello and welcome. It's Charlie Wall here. I am joined today by Neil Hill, who is a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, and he is a bushcraft and survival instructor based in Spain. So, welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Charlie.
I've been really looking forward to talking to you because we run retreats together at your place in Spain. But before we kind of dig into that, I always start with the question, because my podcast is called Courage, Dear Heart, I'd love to know what courage means for you.
That's a good question, isn't it, to start with? I think for me, the answer that I would give is truth. That's the biggest courage, to be truthful to yourself and to others. Yeah, for me, it's really as simple as that. It's being true, is having courage.
So can you give me an example of when you have been true to yourself?
I think one of the biggest ones is following my dream of doing what I really want to do, to make my living from it too, so that there is no distinction between my hobby, if you like, and my work. And there were many times in life when it would have been much easier to not do that. And when I say easier, I mean, I'm talking in terms of fear. So having a normal job, in inverted commas, which I have had for many years as a wildlife biologist, which was a wonderful job in many ways, but increasingly became not right for me. It was a job with a pension. It was a job with security, and to leave all of that was to move into fear in many ways. And everything that I was told by friends, not so much immediate family, but by friends, was, don't do it. You know, you've got this great job. You know, it's a job for life if you want it. Play the game. And it wasn't true for me anymore. And doing what this was true for me. And so that was a big one. You know, it was actually saying, no, this is really what I want to do. And this is true. And maintaining that when things got really tough at times, and they really did financially at times, got super tough. You know, looking for coins down the back of the sofa, tough to do my shopping. So yeah, I guess that's an example.
Yeah, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because I know a lot of people will be quite interested. Like, I know you, I've known you a while. After my father died, I came to stay at your place in Spain, and obviously you told me a little bit about your background and how you'd gotten to be in Spain. So I'm guessing, in terms of the story, you quit England and went to Spain to set up. So tell us about your dream. Tell us about what prompted you to move to Spain, and how you came to be where you are now.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky in that I've always known that I love nature, and I always wanted to work in nature. And for many years, I worked in various projects around Europe, nature-based projects, wildlife conservation projects. And many of these projects involved dealing with politicians. Many of these projects involved dealing with huge amounts of bureaucracy, because that's kind of inevitable, because you're dealing with policy, and you're dealing with the law, and you're dealing with the way people manage the land. You're also dealing with development. And in my case, the word or the phrase was inappropriate development. Like, you know, you have a beautiful nature reserve and somebody wants to build a Tesco's on it, and that's deemed to be inappropriate development. So my job came to be using the bureaucracy of the system to say no to things and to fight things. And deeper inside me, what I wanted to do was to say yes to things, to give permission to people to have an element of adventure in their lives. You know, our lives are often very carefully scripted nowadays. We know exactly, most of us, when we have to get up, when we have to leave the house, when we arrive at the office, what we're going to do when we come home. We know where we shop. We know even in those shops where the different sections of things are. And so it's a very safe and predictable life without that element of adventure. So I wanted to say yes to adventure. I particularly wanted to say yes to adventure to children, because my ex-partner and I would take her children to school, and the whole of the school was covered in warning signs: don't run, don't touch, don't jump, don't play. And there was a little pond that had 2 thick wooden fences around it, covered in danger signs. And I remember as a little kid, when I was at school, the greatest biology learning I ever did was to go out at the break times to a little pond and to lie down and to look into the pond at all the wildlife in it. And it was a very small circular concrete pond. It was nothing super special, but it was to me then. And so I wanted to say yes to kids. Yes, climb a tree. Yes, run on the grass. Yes, let's make a fire together. Yes, let's learn how to use knives. Yes, let's run and fall and get a bruise or a small cut and get dirty and smoky, and to give kids that sort of swallows and Amazons kind of childhood back again. And so that was my motivation and my dream, if you like.
And so had you moved to Spain with your ex-partner and you had that vision that you wanted to create, or was that vision created in your mind when you were still in England?
It was a very impulsive thing, actually. It was after the relationship finished that I suddenly found myself free. And I didn't have my own children. And I was already teaching what I'm teaching now in England with a good friend of mine in the New Forest. And I just suddenly had an opportunity. And I thought what I could do is teach bushcraft in Spain, which is a relatively blank canvas, do something different. And I knew that that Spain has Europe's only true desert, called the Tabernas Desert. And I thought, well, what I could do is I could go there and I could teach desert bushcraft, because the other desert bushcraft courses were taking place in Arizona and places like Namibia, where it costs, a good $1,000 or more to get there. And the courses themselves were a few thousand. And to Tabernas, you could get to Almeria on EasyJet and Ryanair, and I would charge a few hundreds rather than thousands. So I thought I could make this kind of more affordable for more people. And so I went to Almeria almost on a whim, with not that much money, and through various ups and downs, moved to where I am now on the other side of Spain, on the Atlantic side.
And I can vouch for it. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is, isn't it? Yes.
So what is it that you do there now? Like, tell us, because I've been there. I've had a bespoke, unique one-on-one retreat. I've done that. I also run my own retreats there. So what is it that you offer at your space?
We kind of said it there, Charlie. It's a 50-50 thing, really. It's like I do my own courses, which can be adult bushcraft courses. It can be family courses, or it can be children's courses. And they vary between like introductory level bushcraft and wilderness courses, all the way to advanced ones, and even expeditions to places like the Sahara Desert. And then because I have this big, beautiful space here, I can also offer this space for other people like you to come and run their retreats here, whether it's meditation retreats or yoga retreats or whatever it is. And quite a few people come here because of the nature to do fitness retreats too. And in the short time I've been here, the 2 years I've been here, and I've never advertised, it's quite strange. I've literally had people come from all over the world groups from Australia, from the United States, from Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, from all over Europe, from Brazil. It's quite extraordinary how somehow people have managed to find me.
Well, I'm not surprised. It is a beautiful space, and what you offer, I think, is personally, I think it's very unique. So let's just talk a little bit about, so when I run my retreat with you, what I ask you to do, is, aside from providing the beautiful space, is provide nature lessons for those women that come along. Can you just kind of give me or our listeners like a little bit of an introduction into the sort of things that you will be talking about when they come?
Of course I can, Charlie, yes. The focus I like to put on my courses isn't so much teaching people about surviving or survival, which is a very Western approach to being in nature, because in some ways surviving or survival is merely the delaying of dying in an uncomfortable way, whereas thriving in nature is what indigenous people do. So if we look at people who still live in a completely nature-connected way, say in the Amazon rainforest, the Southeast Asian rainforests, if we look at say the Hadza or the Biwi in Africa, or the Bushmen, if we look at the reindeer herders of the tundra, these cultures are not surviving, they're thriving. They're living really healthy, deeply fulfilling, community-based lives, and in some ways the absolute opposite of what we do in the West. So that's the point of view that I like to start with, is that how do we start to reconnect with nature? How do we start to use our senses to find out what's going on around us, to find out where it's safe to be, where we can find food, where we can find medicine, where we find water, and also to connect into the beauty of the wild world too, and to remove some of the fear that surrounds it. Because often I will get people who come here from cities, and for them it can be quite difficult, that transition. There is so much wildlife here, that people get frightened of, well, what was that noise and what was that smell, and so getting re-familiar with nature, getting more comfortable with nature, and beginning to understand that within the seeming randomness, as we look out at a forest or a meadow, there are actually patterns and meaning deeply written into this landscape, that the bird song means something, and is actually telling us a story, is telling us information. If only we could, it's like being in a foreign country and we don't understand the language, and someone's trying to tell us that it's really good to eat there, or something dangerous is coming, and we just don't know. But if we start to understand the language of the birds, then we can understand that they're telling us something. And they're not telling us something because that's their job to tell humans. They're telling each other something that if we know what they're speaking to each other about, then we can start to be aware of what's going on around us. And certainly the rabbits and the foxes and the deer and the other animals are fully listening to the birds, because that's the early warning system in some ways in nature. So what we do is we start to learn the language of the birds. We start to find a special place to sit. And you remember that well from when you were here, that we find our special place. And in some Native American cultures, this is called the medicine spot, a place you literally go to heal, a place you go to connect to nature. And as you're here, you revisit your spot every day, and you deepen your relationship to that spot. But also, that spot deepens its relationship to you, because it's always a two-way thing. And that's the thing in nature. So that's one of the fundamental things. And then, of course, what we can do is when we've become familiar with this place and this place is more familiar with us, then we can go and find wild foods. We can go and find medicinal herbs. We can go and look for what are the animals that have been in the night and in the day, and learn to listen more deeply and to see more keenly. And so that's what I would kind of do with, well, have done with, with your groups.
Yeah, I'm just as you're saying that, I'm just remembering all the amazing things that we did and all the knowledge that you taught us. I think because I work with intuition and wisdom as well, with my people. What would you say to someone who was like, I wouldn't be able to listen to, I wouldn't be able to listen to nature. Like, how can I open my intuition up? What would you say to those people who are a bit skeptical?
I think it's just to stop. And it's almost to stop trying to do anything. You just stop and listen and look and see what happens, to really see what happens. And I had a group here from England 6-7 years ago, and not in this place, but in my old place. And they were all friends who studied Tai Chi together, and one of them was the senior instructor. And we did this listening exercise, and Tim was sitting on a rock, and he was tuning in, listening deeply around him, and as he was listening to all the sounds, he became aware of like a crunching sound, a rasping sound, and he really listened to that, and it got louder and louder and louder, and after the 30 minutes of listening, when we were all then came back round to the campfire, he stood up and started looking around him. What was this crunching noise? And he couldn't see anything. And for him, it was really quite loud. And so he followed this sound and still couldn't see anything. But in front of him was a small wild olive tree. And he realized the sound was coming from that. And it was about 10 feet from where he was sitting. And he said he walked around the tree looking for what this sound was. And then at the back, he saw a column of these big wood ants walking up the tree. And as he looked into this rotten wood area, he saw the ants chewing the wood. And that's what he was hearing. Wow. And he came back to the campfire and told us this story and showed us exactly what had happened. So that was very interesting to see that and to hear that somebody had really tuned in,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So yeah, that's an example, a real example of I'm just moved. If it's got a little bit windy, I've just had to move into the garden because one of my dogs is trying to eat a dead pigeon on the lawn. So I've just got to move that. A little bit of real life nature for you going on there. So I will just move that.
Okay, I'll just wait for you to come back into non-wind.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Don't worry. Listen, I'll just tell the listeners, like, you and I have been trying to organise this podcast for, I would say, over a year, given we first tried before my first retreat there, and then we've been trying again, say, for the last few months. But because of technology, like where Neil is based, it's very off-grid. So he runs his space through... Well, you can tell people, actually, how do you run your space? Because it isn't through any electricity, is it?
Well, no, and that sort of, if I don't know what you can hear at the other end, I'm going back into the patio now, so it should get quieter. But that whirring noise is not a fleet of army helicopters, it's actually my windmill going round. So this place is completely off-grid. I'm not connected to anything. So the power, the electricity comes from a combination of solar and wind, which is stored in my big solar batteries, and the water comes from the wells.
And you've done all this yourself, haven't you?
Well, I've kind of improved what was here. So there was a basic infrastructure here, which I'm gradually sort of improving on and modernizing. And yes, that's what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's fine. Hopefully the dead bird has been removed.
It has. It's over the fence, so it'll be there for the foxes later.
What animals have you got at your space? Like, I know, but I'd love you to tell the listeners who you've got there with you. Like, I know you don't have any humans, but what animals have you got?
Well, looking out from where I'm sitting now, I have a Labrador, Pirata, which is Spanish for pirate, sniffing where the pigeon was, looking a bit disgusted with life. And then I have a lovely black and white dog called Junior. Both of these were abandoned dogs. Pirata was bought by somebody as a hunting dog here, and is like not a good hunter at all. He's just basically like a large mobile teddy bear.
He is, isn't he?
Yes, and he spent the first 2 years of his life in a concrete cage until the owner didn't want him anymore, so he came to me. And then Junior was found abandoned in Estepona with barbed wire around his neck, starving to death. So these two little souls came to me that way. And then there is in the big meadow, there is Speedy the horse, who's another abandoned animal, and my cats, also abandoned by a previous owner. So yes, they've all come one by one here somehow.
And it makes for a beautiful space. So it's Kellogg gone then?
He's not here anymore, sadly.
Okay, so
Yes.
Kellogg, just to everyone listening, Kellogg was the cockerel.
He was the cockerel that everybody had a love-hate relationship with, because he woke everyone up about 5 a.m.
So he's gone. So there's no more cockadoodle doing at 5 a.m. So that might be a selling point.
Yes, he's not waking everybody up now. Yes.
So, like at the moment, at the time of recording, we are in the coronavirus pandemic, and I know that you're isolated there in Spain, and a lot of us are isolated in England. But there are people around. I wondered if you had any advice for people about how they could potentially reconnect to their senses and nature at this time in what's happening in the world.
Yes. Well, I think it's for me, observing what's going on from my remote location, I really feel that the most important service we can do ourselves and the community and our families is to not become afraid, is to not spread fear. And in many ways, the biggest virus that's happening at the moment isn't the corona, but it's fear and panic. And one great way to use our senses in this situation is to actually look at what we've got, rather than the things that we haven't got, the things that we've got used to demanding as our right, at least us in the affluent Western type cultures. And I, like everybody else, am absolutely bombarded by videos and pieces of writing, usually with a doctor or somebody on the front, all spreading bits of information about this or that, lots of things that are taken from publications or have been studied by universities, but taken out of context. And I've received so many videos purporting to show the truth when they're clearly not the truth. And some people are using this as an opportunity to make a post go viral on their social media account by basically making up either a very good, in inverted commas, news story or a very bad, inverted commas, news story, and sharing it with a strong image. And so for me, I see a lot of fear, and I understand why there is fear, but I see people spreading and exacerbating fear when the actual information, the actual things that we need to do are really simple. We need to stay at home. If we do go out, we need to maintain a good distance between ourselves and the next person. And it would make sense to wear gloves and a mask, to wash our hands frequently, and most importantly, to only buy what we need. And I'm in a village here of just about 1,000 people, and there is a market, a daily market, and about 10 very small corner shops, and everybody knows everybody else in this village. And I can guarantee you that if anybody from this village went into a shop and bought 50 toilet rolls, everybody in the queue would look at them. The shopkeeper would say, "What on earth do you think you're doing? You're not buying 50 toilet rolls, you buy 6 now." And of course, that's why, in part, they're not doing it, because this is a true community where people look after each other. And as a real example, I go into the village and there is toilet paper. Every shop has toilet paper. And probably now I'll get 1,000 emails saying, "What's your address, please? Can I have toilet paper?" You know? But the thing is that I go there, and for example, one of the shopkeepers will say, "How much do you want?" And if I actually need any, then I'll say, "Well, just give me the 6-pack or the 4-pack. I don't need a 24-pack right now, because that's actually all I need." I'm not going in and buying 20 kilos of meat and 20 kilos of fish and everything else, you know. I'm buying, like everybody else is here, just what I need for that day or for that week. But what I am doing is I'm making sure I only go in twice a week to the market, and I keep my distance from people. And then I go home with the things I've bought that I actually need, and I thoroughly enjoy them. And that's another way to reconnect with our senses at the moment, is to start looking for the more simple things, rather than having that T-bone steak, rather than having that rare exotic oil or vinegar or whatever it is to just enjoy a really simple meal and not have too much that needs to be thrown away, and enjoy that, because we don't actually really ever know if we're going to get another plate of food again. And for those of us that can, then spending some time in nature under the sun is really, really therapeutic. And for those people that don't have that, then if they have plants or have seeds, plant them. Plant some seeds on your windowsill. You can buy stuff online. You can possibly buy stuff from the supermarket. Start looking after some plants. Even in a high rise, maybe plant some tomatoes, some cherry tomatoes and some lettuce and some basil, and watch them grow, and do these sort of things with the kids, you know. Involve them. Get the kids engaged in like urban jungle trails in the flat, in the house, you know. Get them to find if there's anything living in your house, a fly, a spider, a cobweb. Look under the carpets, look out of the windows, see how many birds you can count of how many different species. Put a teacup outside the window. If it rains, how much rain is falling, how hot, how cold it is. To look at the trees from your windows, see how they change on a daily basis. You know, look at the trees. Are they growing in one direction or another direction? You know, what's this telling us? What's that tree telling us? You know, start trying to find out how we can find where north and south is. You know, these are little activities that we can do to sort of create like our own little urban nature trail, even in a small flat, you know, and to occupy and to engage. And within all of that, think of ways of sharing, think of ways of giving at the moment. That when you go into a shop is, okay, I don't need that now, so I will leave the else. Or I only need one of those things, I can leave that for somebody else. To think about your elderly neighbors, if you have any, you know, how are they doing? Do they need help with shopping? Have you got, if you do have 100 toilet rolls, you know, can you give them to people? You know, I was lucky enough to have in my workshop a big packet of face masks that I've had for a couple of years now, just for doing projects around the property. And I saw that the butcher Gaspar and one of the local shopkeepers, Lolly, they had really cheap paper masks. And so, okay, well, I've got masks. I can give my masks to these people. They actually need those masks because they're in daily contact, you know. And thinking about how we can share is another way to get in touch with our senses in this time. And from a survival point of view, if you were suddenly in a situation that's unfamiliar or dangerous or threatening, the first thing you do is, and you take a breath and you look around you and you would empty your rucksack and you would look at, what have I got? You know, a penknife, magnifying glass, sleeping bag, whatever it is. And we can do that in our houses. We can do, what have I got? I've got heat, I've got electricity, I've got light. I have water in the tap. I have a cupboard full of this food. So, okay, I'm okay for a few days. I don't need to panic. I don't need to go and buy too much, you know. I can make do with this. And do I actually need to go out to the shop today? You know, can I open that tin of salmon that's been sitting at the back of the cupboard for 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, you know? And let's make something and be creative with that. And so in a genuine situation where, as I said right at the beginning, where we have very familiar planned lives, very familiar patterns in our life, and survival kicks in, or a challenge kicks in when that pattern is disrupted, when we suddenly can't have the things we take for granted. And then we start moving into a different way of, well, what have I got now? What can I use now? I've got some pasta. Okay, well, let's just have some simple tinned salmon with pasta. That can make a meal, you know. I don't have to have the 20-year-old aged balsamic vinegar that I need to go to Waitrose to buy today. I don't need that now. I can get away with just being, you know, just having a few things around, and realizing that by me not going out is giving the opportunity for somebody else to go and get something if they really need it, you know. So I guess that's what I'd say at the moment.
One last question that occurs to me as you were speaking, because, you know, I was talking to my friend about this morning, about how exactly what you were saying, you know, hopefully what may come out of this is people's a deeper sort of knowing that we don't need as much as we think we do. I mean, I know people have been, you know, panic buying and stuff, and you know, some of the scenes have been quite difficult to watch, but I'm hoping that on a collective consciousness we'll start to see, you know, without all the pollution, butterflies are coming back in England. I don't know what it's like where you are, you know, like the swans I saw turned up on Venice Canal. And, you know, have you seen any impact of nature, given I know you where you live it's pretty spectacular anyway, but has there been any knock-on effect that you're aware of in Spain with regards to nature?
In my particular bit of very wild Spain, it's almost business as usual. It kind of almost is in the village. And certainly on the land, I don't notice any great change. Occasionally people go for a walk along the footpath along my boundary, and obviously that's stopped for now, but that's not a disturbance, you know,
No.
for me. That I haven't noticed. I do notice in the village that what people are talking about in the village is not fear. In Facinas, my village, they're talking about how we can help each other. And if people are sharing photographs of anything in the village through the town council, it's that the ironmongers, and we have a good proper ironmongers in the village still, a ferreteria they call it here, where you can buy all your hardware. They have gone out and managed to find face masks for the health workers. Another shop has managed to rent a car, a 4x4 that they can use for disinfecting the streets. And what the photographs are, what the stories are, is how the village is pulling together, how they're supporting each other. And that's the reality of what I'm seeing. I know in a big city it's different. I know that where I live is not typical. But what I do know is that Spain as a country is behaving very, very responsibly. People are taking the staying indoors very seriously. They are doing proper social distancing here. Whilst there is definitely a run on some goods in supermarkets, meat and the classic toilet paper thing, generally speaking, people are behaving well. They're not going out in public places. They're not making a fuss. And every night here in Spain at 8 o'clock in the towns and the cities, the police driving convoys through the streets with all their lights and sirens on, not to scare people, but to show people that they're being looked after. And then what the people do is they come to their balconies and to their windows and they applaud the police. And they're not just applauding the police. The idea at 8 o'clock, and it's called the 8 o'clock here, is that people are standing on their balconies and they're applauding the doctors, the nurses, the cleaners, the supermarket workers, the people who are keeping the public services going, who are putting themselves at risk, and they're saying thank you. And there's a real community spirit. And this is the sort of information that is so much better to share than the other stuff that's being shared that I see, the fear, the panic, the anger. And of course that happens here too, that's shared here too. But also I am seeing a really, really wonderful side to human beings. And tragically people are dying in Spain. 3,000 people are dead before their time. But most of those who've died are already very ill in some way. And had those people contracted normal flu, whatever that is, but normal flu, they probably or possibly also would have died. But at the same time, people are not driving to work. There are fewer road accidents. The society in which we live kills people another way, through lack of exercise, through eating the wrong foods, through stress, through heart attacks, through cancer, through many, many other illnesses. Tens of millions of people die early every year because of the system in which we normally live, the full-on, it's not even 9 to 5 anymore, but 8 or 7 working, the pressure on us to buy, to look good, to conform, to have the new thing, and to breathe in all that pollution. That kills far more people than the coronavirus ever does, but that's the so-called normal life that everybody wants to go back to. And actually, in some ways, that's the disease. That's the real disease, you know? This is something that is maybe allowing us to take a pause and a breath and to say, well, do I want to go back to that? And like where we started this conversation, you know, what is actually my dream? Maybe I want to teach guitar. Maybe I want to be an artist. Maybe I don't want to work anymore. And I want to stay at home with my children and watch them grow up. And yes, we all have less stuff. Inevitably, we have to have less stuff if we do that. But we actually end up with having richer lives. And so this could be an opportunity to think, okay, well, what do I actually want to do? Is really what I want to do when this ends is to jump back in my car at 6 o'clock in the morning and drive 80 miles to an office to do work I don't want to do. Or maybe I want to do something different now. Maybe I have enjoyed the sharing experience and I want to find a work where I can do more of that, you know. I don't know. These are just ideas that come to mind, and I'm not criticizing anybody for anything or suggesting that something is better or worse. It's just things that come up at the moment with this opportunity that we have to not be as busy as we have been, you know, Charlie.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I'm still quite busy because I
Yes.
work online, but I genuinely see, you know, there's something around seeing this as an invitation to look more to yourself, to look more to your inner guidance system, to look more and listen more to intuition. So I definitely agree with you there, and I think that's a good place to end it, although I probably could spend all day talking to you and asking you questions. I think I'm mindful of the time. So just like to ask, or if you could tell the listeners where they can find you, your website, email, anything you want to share.
Well, I mean, if you look for something called Rewilding Bushcraft, that's my website, and on the website it has all my contact details, and that's the best place to find me, really, the
Great.
website.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes on wherever I broadcast this, which will be everywhere. I normally put it everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Charlie.
Well, obviously we had to cancel our retreat, which was due next week, which we will hopefully be running together with any luck later on in the year. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But thank you so much for your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
And to you, Charlie, and thank you very much for your time too.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you, Charlie.